Hello! Welcome back to the Long Distance Love Bombs podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, and today's guest is Veronica Grant. Veronica is a love and life coach. She works with women who have everything except for love. She helps them to discover deeper parts of themselves so that they can access a deeper connection with others, including significant others. And in this conversation, we talk about why we choose to date unavailable people, what emotional availability actually means. We talk about dating in a pandemic world. We talk about rejection and resiliency to rejection. We talk about how early childhood experiences influence the way that we show up in the world around us. It's a good, fun conversation, and it starts off in perhaps the most random way possible, with me talking about Batman. So, without further ado, you can enjoy this conversation with Veronica Grant. Veronica Grant is her name. You can enjoy this conversation with Veronica Grant. And I'm going to leave that in because I prioritize realness, you know? It's what you're here for. Anyway, I'll shut up now. Enjoy this chat with Veronica Grant. Zoom has that new update where it makes...
I hate it so much.
It's like the creepiest way to get consent. It's like this robotic, demonic, like, this meeting is being recorded. It's like...
I hate it so much. Oh,
anyway.
I don't like pop-up box, but the voices. Oh.
The voice, like, could they not have gotten it? Like, last year I downloaded this app called Waze to help you, like, get around town. It's like a map thing.
Yeah.
They had some feature where you could turn your car into the Batmobile. And so obviously I selected that. And what I didn't realize was that the voice that gives you directions is like Batman. And he talks in expressions that Batman would use. So like at the start, this is a complete tangent to start the podcast. So thank you for your patience, even though we've never really met. But so like you would start a trip and you'd enter your destination and it would find it and you'd push go to start traveling. And it would say things like, locked and loaded, let's go find the Joker. And like, anyway, like, could they not have found Batman or someone cooler to do the Zoom consent reading is my point. Veronica Grant, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So for those who have never heard of Veronica Grant, don't know who you are, what you do, like, what's your deal? How do you describe yourself? Who are you?
It's a loaded question to start off with. I always like oscillate between, okay, do I just answer that by telling people what I do, or do I answer that by, going a layer deeper? I always try to, dance in between.
Let's do both.
So I am a love coach for women who have it all except that one thing, meaning love in this case. And I mean, I guess really a big part of my work is, I think, really my purpose for being, here on planet Earth. Relationships, and particularly romantic relationships, it's not something that I was just born out of the womb being really good at, or at least with my upbringing, it was not something that I learned or became good at. And so it really became just kind of like this thing that was tied up in some core wounding, some soul lessons, maybe like, Dharma that I've really have just used as a way to connect with myself. And then that's, then my work that I do with clients, my business is very much an extension of that.
So you did a bunch of deep dive into your own personal roller coaster past and learned a bunch of stuff and then used that as a foundation to teach from.
Yeah. So I thought my core wounding was all tied up in body image, food. I grew up in a family where the women constantly commented on my body, my sister's body, celebrities' bodies, their own bodies, each other's bodies. And so it just became like this very I went on my first diet, I think when I how old are you in sixth grade? Like 10 or 11 or so. That was the first time I was like, oh, I need to lose weight and start counting calories. And I can even remember the very moment, the first time I ever felt fat. I was on the bus. I was like, I think it might have been right after Christmas break, but I just remember being on the bus and feeling like, oh, I can feel my pants like squeezing my belly, and automatically knowing what to do just because I had heard the women in my family talking about this kind of stuff just freaking constantly. And that became the way in which I got attention from them, approval, like, oh, Veronica's looking skinny, Veronica's looking good. That just feels like, it was attention. So it feels like love. It's very easy to get that confused, especially when you don't know otherwise, when you're like 10 years old or whatever. And so that translated to, oh, I can get this guy or get into that relationship or get this if I look a certain way. And I never unlearned that until well into my late 20s. And so I began really with wanting to heal dieting, heal my relationship with my body. I just honestly became exhausted of the whole charade. I mean, I would count my calories when I had back when I had a corporate job, and if I knew that I was going to go get happy hour with my friends after work, but I had already used my calorie allotment for the day, I'm like, well, crap, I have to eat dinner, and now I also want a glass of wine, to go out with my friends. I would close my office door and literally do jumping jacks to quote unquote earn my calories for the rest of the day. And um, so long story, I guess I can really get into it. Long story short, I ended up quitting that job because I got offered a job on the Obama campaign, which is what I really wanted to do. I really wanted to get into politics. And so I couldn't say no, even though it was like literally half my salary. And so I joined the Obama campaign. Working on any kind of campaign is just, it's your life. I mean, we're talking like probably about 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week. You might have Sunday mornings off. And that's pretty much my life. So obviously was not able to count the way I used to. And then after the campaign ended, I thought, oh, I would just need like a good weekend to sleep it off, and then I'll be back to normal, energy back to normal. And that was the first time I really learned about like energy and just sheer exhaustion. And so I just didn't have time, or I didn't have the energy just to go back into counting like that. And so at the same time, I was laying on my mom's couch because at this point I was unemployed because the Obama campaign had ended, didn't get a job in the White House. And so I was laying on the couch looking for jobs, and I was also scrolling Instagram. And this was back on Instagram's early days when everyone was posting pictures of their food. And so I had this friend, and she was a vegan. And so she had this vegan blog. She was like the first person that I knew that was like blogging and posting and whatever. So I was following this, and I was like, wow, this food looks so good. And I love that she loves the food, and she loves eating it. She loves talking about it. She loves making it. She loves everything about it. And I was just like, that's how I want to relate to food. So therefore I must be a vegan if I want to relate to food like that. And so I became a vegan. Now I had been vegetarian on and off my whole life. So being a vegan wasn't like the farthest, jump from where I had been previously. And so, yeah, I became a vegan, and it really did help me transform my relationship with food, because I would look up these vegan recipes. I love trying to find the most meatiest kind of food, like, like a Philly cheesesteak. I'm like, how can I veganize this and make it taste good? Like that. I just love doing that. It was so fun. And so became a vegan, really helped me change my relationship to food. This inspired me to be a health coach. At this point, I already been teaching yoga on and off. I wanted to get more into that. I've been teaching fitness classes on and off, wanted to get more into that. And so I was like, yeah, health coaching certification seems to make sense to kind of wrap this whole thing up, and I can just, this is what my life's going to be. And so I started my business, got into it, and I was like, wow, I really, really hate talking about food and this kind of stuff all the time. It just got boring. And at the same time, I couldn't eat my favorite food, which was sushi. I love sushi. And I mean, I know there's vegan sushi, but it's just really not the same. And so I would have this like feeling where I could just like feel or hear the sushi calling my name, like, you want me, Veronica, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like back in the day when I used to diet, I could hear the cookies or the chips and salsa calling my names. I'm like, okay, so I think being a vegan has run its course, it served its purpose, and now, it's time to move on from that. So anyways, so not a vegan anymore, but it definitely was the bridge to help me kind of heal some of the stuff. And so back to my business, that was kind of a tangent, but back to my business, I, was talking about relationship with food, relationship with body, and was bored by it. business wasn't really working. I think I'd gotten like one client in like 6 months. So not going very well. Most of my business at that point was teaching mostly private yoga, really. And so then I was working with a coach, and she kind of branded herself as a life and business coach. And so we were unpacking a lot of my own stuff. And that's when it really became clear to me that my relationship with food really was very much tied to my relationship with romantic relationships, with sex, and with men. And once I was able to see that connection, that really helped me in my, at that point, current relationship with my boyfriend. But then it also really helped me just get just a lot of clarity on what I needed to do myself to heal, but then what I really wanted to help other people do as well. And so, so that's kind of how I got into this field in a very roundabout way.
Yeah, I love it. I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
You said that unpacking your relationship to food also made you realize that it was connected to your sex life, your love life, your relationships. What do you mean by that? Can you expand on that?
Yeah. So I think that we relate to, and I'm just going to speak as a straight woman for a second. I think we relate, at least for myself, I think I relate to money, food, and men in very much the same ways, because they can, in our society, they can very much all be precursors to our self-worth. And so I think that, if I was feeling skinny, or if I was fitting into my skinny jeans, or looking good, or looking hot in a dress or whatever, then my worthiness, or my perceived worthiness, went up. My worth isn't always up, but my perceived worthiness went up. If I was feeling fat, if I had a pimple, if I felt like I didn't look good, or if I was even with, like, I don't know, going out with a group of friends where I felt like, oh, well, I'm the fat one, or I'm the ugly one, or whatever, then my perceived worthiness was way down, and I felt like crap about myself. And the same thing is true with men. If a guy liked me, especially a guy that I perceived as, quote unquote, out of my league, or hot, or whatever, I'm like, oh, I'm on top of the world. Like, I'm awesome. This is great. Life is great. But then the second that he was like, not so much, then, my perceived worthiness was just, in the freaking pooper, and life was really hard. And so I think that I was using food and men in very much the same ways. It was just it's somewhere between like a lever and like a thermostat as to like how good I wanted to feel. Like I could control how I felt about myself if I was controlling the amount of food that I was eating, so that I was, in my skinny days, and then I would feel good. Right. And then same thing, if I wanted to control how I was feeling in my love life or my social life, then I could go out and try to, get a boyfriend or whatever. It wasn't so much about like one night stands for me. Like I've always been very much like the relationship type. Like I was dreaming about my future husband when I was like 10 years old. I don't know why, but really, really young. Like I always wanted to be, actually, I do have some pretty good reasons. We can get into that later on. I think I know why I was doing that. But I think, I think money really is the same way as well. Like, oh, I can feel good about myself if I have this really successful career, if I make a lot of money, if I get all these clients, or blah, blah, blah. And so what happened is I just kept transferring the place I was outsourcing my worthiness to. And then I had to just at some point turn it back on myself. I'm like, okay, I can keep like, quote unquote, healing my relationship with food, or healing my relationship with, men or whatever. But if I didn't look at like what the actual root was, rather than the manifestation of the problem, then I was just going to keep, transferring it to another area of my life.
Yeah. It sounds like the money, food, relationship situation was a symptom of a deeper core cause, which was your perceived self-worth, right? And it sounds also like
how to get it.
Yeah. And so it sounds like the way that you were trying to obtain self-worth or self-love, let's say, was based on external circumstances, such as a number on a scale, a number in a bank account, love from somebody that you thought was good, compliments, praise, etc. Right?
100%.
And so then you were trying to control those things that were feeding you internally. So it was like it's about control, right?
100%. Okay. Absolutely.
All right. So did we cover that sufficiently? Okay. So then how then did you take that information or that place in life and then start to dive into the work that you're doing now?
So I had actually, I had two really, really bad breakups right in a row, just boom, boom, like same thing. It was almost the exact same situation in both relationships. And so the first relationship, I was like, that sucks. Second relationship, I'm like, what the heck's going on? And so that's the first time I worked with someone on this. And I forget what she called herself. I think she was like a spiritual counselor of some sort. I was living abroad at the time. And in our first session, she kept asking me about my upbringing and about my family life and what my relationship was like with my mom and my dad and my sister. And I was like, why is she talking to me about this? Like, I don't understand. And so I forget exactly what I told her. I mean, I can remember a few things I told her, but I don't remember exactly what prompted this comment that she said. And the comment was, oh, so your family wasn't very emotionally available. It wasn't a very close family. And I was like, I was a little taken aback and I was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I think yeah, you're absolutely right. And, when we're growing up, we know what what's going on in the four walls of our house, but you have no reason to believe that all families aren't like that. When I'm 10 years old and like our family doesn't really talk at dinner except for maybe logistics for the next day. And then the rest of the time you just hear like forks clinking. It's like, how do I know that not every family is like that, when you're a kid? And so that's really what made me realize like, oh, like I didn't really learn I mean, there's lots of issues with growing up and, look, we all have our issues and no family or no parenting or whatever is perfect. But ultimately my family, there was no sense of boundaries. There was no sense of, emotional closeness because of the no boundaries. It wasn't safe to say what you needed, ask for what you wanted, say your opinion or whatever, because that could set somebody off. And that's, again, the lack of boundaries. And then, I see my mom and the other women in my family just constantly being obsessed with what they look like as if that's like the purpose of, life and the end all be all. So I didn't know how to emotionally connect with people in a really deep or meaningful way, and including myself. And I think that I don't know if everyone's wired like this, if this is just something that like I'm wired to, but like I had this deep, deep yearning to connect. I had this journal when I was growing up. It was like this little brown leather bound journal. And I would collect all of these inspirational quotes that they would say in like movies and TV shows. I wrote with my little sparkly gel pen, and I painted stars in my bedroom growing up. And I had like little stars that had like quotes around like the stars, like shoot for the moon, land among the stars, that kind of stuff. But I just love this idea of like connecting to something bigger, greater, more and more and more, like self-discovery, except that like I didn't know how to, how to do that. And so I think that's really what created a lot of my wounding, and not really being able to connect with men in the way that I wanted to connect with them. And the only way I knew how, I'm like, well, I guess I can have them think I'm hot. And when that's like an adult situation, that means like sex, potentially without the emotional intimacy. But, I had a lack of understanding that physical intimacy doesn't equal emotional intimacy. And so that just created like all these messes over and over and over again in my 20s until I was able to see like, oh, I didn't learn from a young age how to develop this emotional availability to myself and to others. And that really is what sprung off, the work that I do now, which is inner child work.
Mm. And so one of the topics that we were going to discuss was why, quote unquote, why do I attract emotionally unavailable people? Right. Or I've heard it described by clients as like, why do I only date assholes? Right. And so it sounds like this is a good place to drop that in there as it relates to what you've just described from your own childhood and having the epiphanies that you did about what was going on, what you were taught, how you learned to love, how you learned to connect, etc. Anything to say about that? I mean, I imagine you have a bunch of stuff to say about that.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that. So I always say, if you have like one certain kind of like one relationship where it was just really shitty or just really crappy, but it was kind of just like a one-time thing, I kind of say, you know what, shit happens. I'm not saying like it's good, not saying it doesn't hurt, not saying there's not something to learn from it, but shit happens. I'm once you start attracting like the same person with a different face or the same kind of relationship with a different person every time, that's when I'm like, okay, that's when we need to kind of get curious and see what's going on here. So, I just want to preface this with saying that I think we have to take self-responsibility, but I also don't think we want to blame ourselves for bad things happening to ourselves either. So I think there's, I think on some respects it's a gray area. Some respects, like, it's definitely a black and white situation, and where someone did not cause something bad to happen to themselves. But I think in terms of what we're talking about, if you have a lack of ability to be vulnerable with yourself and deeply connect with yourself and trust yourself and sit with your feelings and all of those kind of things, then you're going to have a really hard time letting someone else in. So one of two things are going to likely happen. You're either going to just be completely shut off and want someone to like come save you, and you expect them to bust down your walls, which, I guess it happens in rom-coms, but that's about it. Or you're not going to have any discernment and you're just going to let everybody in because you so desperately want to be loved and to be, have that security of a relationship. That was more of my situation. Either way, you could be attracting the emotionally available people, but if you're actually closed off, then you might be pushing them away. But if you are letting just anyone in, then I think we have to ask ourselves, okay, what are your patterns that you're playing out that are going to work nicely with someone else's patterns who aren't emotionally available? And then you're just going to be attracted to others. So the most common example is if you have people-pleasing patterns, for example, because maybe you grew up and you wanted to be like the good girl or the good boy, whatever, to not rock the boat, to not upset mom or dad, or to, earn their love or their attention or whatever, you might develop some people-pleasing patterns. And people-pleasing patterns is different from being kind and genuine. People-pleasing is, I'm going to do this thing because I want them to love me back, or I want them to give me attention because there's a transaction that you want, that's desired from the action. So who is going to love a people pleaser? Someone who wants the world to be about them. So someone who has narcissistic tendencies. And that's just it's the other side of the coin of being emotionally unavailable. They have to get their own, love, attention, self-worth, all that kind of stuff from someone outside of themselves. So that's just one example of how two patterns that are essentially emotionally unavailable can actually do quite well together, even though it's not necessarily what you want. And so while I don't think that like no one's broken, no one has to fix themselves because they're not broken, but I do think it's worth asking yourself, if you're not happy with who you're attracting, to ask yourself, from where am I attracting these relationships? Am I attracting these relationships from a place of just wanting to be loved, wanting to be chosen, wanting someone to make me feel good about myself? Like, you're really just setting yourself up for someone who might have some narcissistic tendencies or some controlling tendencies or some, like, I don't know, not serious, let's just play around kind of tendencies. Because when you think about it, like in a very logical way, like it just makes sense that those two energies would kind of go together. And the final thing I'll say about that is, when that's been your pattern in relationships, you've probably experienced high highs and low lows. And the high highs feel like really, really, really good, almost addictive, like really, really, really good. And so what happens when that's been your experience, you mistake that high with like, oh, this is what love is. This is what I want. Da, 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 da. And so then you meet someone who is more emotionally available, more emotionally in tune with you, open to intimacy, all of those things. And they're boring, or they're like the nice person or whatever. And so then you feel like you're in this trap of like, well, I know these people are like the emotionally available ones or the bad ones or the assholes or whatever your clients say. But but I only like those people. Like the other people are completely boring, or I'm not interested, or whatever. And if that's, again, a pattern, then my guess is that you know, the way that I describe love is, I think love is less of a feeling and more of like a state of being. So I think happiness and love are basically states of being. Within that love, you can feel different things, right? Like you can be very angry at your partner or feel hurt at your partner, but still ultimately be in a state of love with your partner. And so the state of love is fairly constant. Like it's not like ups and downs. Like, well, I love you one day, I don't love you next day. Like, again, you can love all the time, but be really mad one day and then not be mad the next day because you worked it out, right? And so when love is more of that constant and you're used to the ups and downs, that's when it can begin to feel really confusing, because you're actually attracted to the emotionally unavailable because you're seeking that high, that what's you want, like that itch scratched, so to speak.
The euphoria.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah, like it reminds me of the difference between loving someone and liking someone. So like a couple months ago, I looked at my girlfriend and I was like, you know what? Like, I really like you. And she was kind of like, she's used to my little Jeremy random thoughts and things. But she's like, okay, right? But like what I meant was, like, I always have love for her. It's like a foundation, right? Like I love her. Sometimes she drives me cuckoo up a tree. Sometimes she makes me angry. Sometimes, like, we have our ups and downs. But what I meant in that moment was like that I like you, like I enjoy you, right? And so I was trying to distinguish between the two. And it sounds like what you're describing is the complexity of being human, right? Is that you can hold seemingly contrasting judgments at the same time. Like I can love you and not want to talk to you right now at all.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
I could care deeply about you, but just not right now. Because I'm busy or whatever.
Yeah. That reminds me of Parks and Rec. Did you watch that show?
No.
Leslie Knope. Oh, it's so good. You have to watch it. But anyway, okay. Leslie Knope. It's Amy Poehler show. Her and her, oh my God, I'm totally forgetting her boyfriends, but they say, I love you and I like you.
I love you and I like you. Yeah. Yeah. And so another way that I've heard this described is like, if you're choosing emotionally unavailable people, then you need to look at where you're emotionally unavailable, right? So maybe it's helpful if we kind of got ahead of ourselves. How do you describe being emotionally available, and like, why is that important?
Yeah. So I think being emotionally available is more of a spectrum rather than like an on and off switch. And I also think that, kind of like the whole idea with the I love you and I like you thing, you can be generally emotionally available, but then like have a day where or even a few days or a few weeks where like you're not available emotionally for whatever reason. You might just be going through some stuff and you're just not available to be open or vulnerable to let somebody in. And that doesn't mean like during those 3 weeks, like you're destined to like be in crappy relationships or be in a crappy relationship with your partner or attract crappy people or whatever. I think that there's a few main ways to kind of self-check yourself. That was too many selves. Anyway, I said that wrong. I think there's a few questions you can ask yourself. So I think the first question is looking at your, what I call rejection resilience versus avoiding rejection, becoming rejection avoidant. So being rejection avoidant is actually emotionally unavailable, because part of being in a relationship or part of dating, you might experience rejection, and that's just part of the deal, right? If you want to be in those two spaces, one of those two spaces, then you have to be willing to be rejected. So being rejection avoidant is basically like not really asking for what you need, or not really saying what you feel or what you think, or sharing something with someone out of fear of rejection. Being rejection resilient is, doing the scary thing. So asking the person on the next date, or sharing what you feel or what you want, or that you want to become official, or whatever it is, knowing full and well that you definitely could be rejected. You're going out on a limb, And if you were to get rejected, sure, it would hurt. You would be sad, but it wouldn't erode your worthiness. So when it's like, oh, this really hurts, like I just need to take a minute or take a day or a week or whatever, a month, and just let this, ride through these emotions, that's being rejection resilient. If it's more of like, oh my gosh, why me? No one likes me. I'm always going to be single. Da, 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 when it's kind of going into more of that kind of self-talk, then it's really eating at your worthiness. I wouldn't say that's rejection avoidant because you got rejected, but it's more of it's just eating away at the self-worth. And when rejection can hurt without it affecting the self-worth, to any large degree, I think that's a sign of being emotionally available. And I think alongside of that, I think it's helpful to look at how and if you're being triggered. So the way I define being triggered is when your reaction is greater than the thing that actually happened. So, for example, if you're with somebody for 6 months, a year, whatever, and you break up, especially if you're out of the blue or they break up with you, like I would expect you to feel really sad, devastated, a little blindsided. All of that would be very par for the course. You might need to take some time for yourself, clear your socials calendar, maybe not go to work for a few days, take a mental health day, all that kind of stuff. Very normal. If you go on one date, 2 dates, even just date someone for a few weeks and they break up with you and you have a very similar kind of reaction, then my guess is that that breakup is bumping up against something deeper. So it's not really the breakup or the person leaving you because you didn't even really know the person. Like it's not really about them. It's about something else. And for me, that's always a sign like, okay, there's probably something else going on here, which means that whatever that thing that this situation is getting bumped up against, it's probably really not going to allow you to be as open as you probably want to be to attract the kind of relationship that you're looking for. So I think those are my two biggest things. And, of course, like, I think when people think about being emotionally available, I think they always think of vulnerability. And that's kind of like one of those things of like, people say, oh, you have to love yourself first before you can love someone. And it's like, okay, well, what does loving myself mean? Like, what does that actually look like? And, so yeah, it's true. You have to be vulnerable. That's one sign of being emotionally available, but I know that can be like, well, what the heck does that actually mean? I don't think being vulnerable necessarily means like, okay, I'm another pop culture reference. I'm like really obsessed with The Bachelor. It's like my guilty pleasure or whatever. It's a dumb thing, but you can actually learn so much about it. It's fascinating. And for the Bachelor, like being vulnerable is about like sharing like your deepest, darkest secret, or like your past or some horrible, devastating breakup or whatever. And so I think people think that's what being vulnerable is, and that is being vulnerable. I mean, that's certainly a way to be vulnerable, but that's not necessarily what it means. Being vulnerable is just really sharing your state of feeling in the moment. So it can be, having a first date with someone and getting to the bar or the restaurant or whatever, and being like, wow, I'm feeling really nervous, but I'm excited to meet you. I've been looking forward to this, and that just seems like a normal human thing to say, but you're in that moment, you're saying exactly how you feel. That's being vulnerable. And so I think that the more you're able to bring that kind of language into the space, then you're setting yourself up to be emotionally available. And then you can work up to greater emotional intimacy, which might then include sharing some deeper, darker, no, I shouldn't say darker, just deeper things about you, stories, past experiences, that kind of stuff. So those are, I don't know, those are three benchmarks that I'm always going to look at when I'm asking myself or clients, if they're being emotionally available.
Yeah, I love the rejection resilience phrase and kind of wish that I wrote that. And I haven't heard it put together in that way before. When you talk about connection and vulnerability, we like in the space in the world tend to focus on those things, like just be authentic, keep your chin up, be vulnerable, whatever. But I think if you go down another layer, it's what you've described there, which is like a skill that you can practice or cultivate is resiliency in the face of rejection. Meaning, like, if I don't get chosen, that's okay. I still think I'm awesome. I'm still a catch. I'm still the fucking prize. Like, I'm worthy of being chosen, even though I wasn't chosen this time. Right. And there's a big difference with that. And I think that resiliency component is really an interesting one. I was on a call a couple of days ago with this guy, Stephen Jenkinson, who's he was in the death trade, as he calls it, doing palliative care. But he said, crisis is a skill. And I really loved that. That it's something that you can practice, that you can be okay with. You can be in a moment of heartbreak. Like, heartbreak is a skill. Overwhelm is a skill. Feeling ambivalent is a skill. In the same way that rejection, I think, is also a skill that you can work through and work on. That's just some thoughts that you brought up for me. Anything to add to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I can add is I do just want to emphasize that rejection resilience it's not about bypassing your feelings either. Like, oh, I'm worthy, I'm great, like whatever.
Doesn't matter. I don't really care.
Like, fuck that, whatever. Like, I mean, not that you should make yourself feel sad if you're not sad, but wherever, if you're feeling sad, even if you quote unquote know that the guy was being a jerk or whatever, those two things can coexist. And I think that's really important to feel, because I think that when we don't feel the uncomfortable feelings, like the sadness, the pain, the rejection, the hurt, whatever, then, I always use like the whack-a-mole imagery, because then we're like, oh, I don't want to feel this, I want to feel that. And you're like, whacking the mole as it comes out of the little, I don't know, the thing that it's in. Mm. And the thing about emotions is that it's not really pick or choose or it's like you feel all of them or none of them. And so, with a big part of rejection resilience is, feeling whatever you're feeling, even if you quote unquote know the person was a jerk or not the right one for you or whatever. Because if you suppress the emotions you don't want to feel, then it makes it harder to feel the emotions you do want to feel, like, happiness, joy, calm, contentment, all of those kinds of things. So that will, come back later to bite you if you do that.
I think part of the process of building resiliency means that you kind of work through all of the steps quicker and quicker. In a sense, you're healing faster. You're scar faster than before is a line that I've written. And so it's as you say, it's not about like talking crap about the person that chose you and like drinking your troubles away and just avoiding all the feelings and talking yourself into it. It's more like, so for example, the other day, a buddy of mine sent me a text message that said, I'm not going to lie, it still hurts when people unsubscribe from my newsletter. Right. And it was like a vulnerable little share. Like it's kind of cute. Right. But what he was doing there was he was admitting it. It was like, this hurts. And then kind of feeling that hurt and then checking in with it, getting curious, and then being like, I'm good now, because I've reminded myself that like A, B, and C, and onward we go. And so something like that may have taken 5 seconds, 5 minutes versus, 5 days or 5 weeks.
Oh yeah. I remember the first time I sent my first newsletter out and I got unsubscribed, and I just like wanted to hide under my desk in the corner. I'm like, oh my God, everyone hates me. Right. And yeah, I can totally relate to that. It's not that I love seeing unsubscribes, but it's like, okay, I'm not the right person for them. That's cool. Wish them the best, Yeah.
And so there's levels to that, right? Like you've graduated up the resiliency school or whatever. Another thing we're going to talk about, pandemic. Have you heard of the pandemic that's been going on?
I've heard someone describe it as the panini.
The panini, yeah. The panny, the manny and the panny. We've been going through a thing. Yeah. People have been feeling and facing a lot. What are your thoughts on dating post-pandemic or a current pandemic? I don't know if this thing's ever probably going to end.
And I guess it depends where, someone's listening in from.
Yeah, that's true.
But so I think that, well, I mean, I don't know if you've had other people talk about this on your show, but I think, it probably goes without saying that the pandemic revealed a lot of darker truths that we already knew were in like society. And then, they just got brought up to the surface. And I think the same thing happened to many people on micro levels. Just, when people weren't able to go to every single happy hour and then every single like Orange Theory class and going to work and doing this and going on vacation, and they just had to sit at home, all of their stuff kind of came up. And so I think it really offered just a unique opportunity. Just like you're kind of forced to just either choose to sit with your feelings and numb out, or sit with your feelings and do something about it. And, and so anyways, that's the first thing. The second thing is, and this isn't really applicable as much anymore because we're not post-pandemic, but we are in a different world than we were in 2020 for the most part. I think that the pandemic offered an opportunity to, and I kind of touched on this earlier, but it offered an opportunity to build emotional intimacy before physical intimacy, was built. So whether you were meeting someone on Zoom calls more, or FaceTime, or having walks in the park, or a coffee, outdoor date, whatever, you weren't, going home and just like having sex after the first date or second date. And not that I know it's saying there's really nothing wrong with that. I'll talk about that in a second. But I think what a lot of people do, or I think this is, I don't know. In my experience, I think it's true with a lot of women. I can't speak for other groups, straight women, but I do think that, at least, and I know from my experience, I didn't know how to get the emotional intimacy that I wanted in a relationship. And so I would jump to physical intimacy a lot sooner than when there was and before there was emotional safety. So you can 100% have physical intimacy as early as you want, but if there's not emotional intimacy, if there's not emotional safety, then it's just risky business. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. You just have to know what you're signing up for. And so I think that the pandemic really offered an opportunity to, build some emotional intimacy with someone. And then you have the talk about like, okay, are we going to isolate for 10 days? Or are we going to get tested? Or like, what are you safe? Or what do you feel comfortable with? What am I feel comfortable with? And you had to have this conversation if you wanted to meet, unmasked indoors or whatever. Obviously, that's not so much the world that we're in, these days. But even now, if someone is looking for a long-term relationship, then, I think that we can bring this lesson of building the emotional intimacy first, with us into this whatever new normal post-pandemic world, whenever that happens. And so I kind of tell my clients, like, maybe dating doesn't really change that much for you, except for the fact that maybe now you're not really having conversations around, are you going to get tested, isolate, all that kind of stuff. But you really are trying to focus on the emotional intimacy first before the physical intimacy comes in. And then once the emotional intimacy is established and you have the physical intimacy, that can help, the emotional intimacy. And so it kind of forces you to be more emotionally available because you're just getting, I don't know, you're just forcing yourselves to like talk to each other and get to know each other. And how would you deal with conflict? And what do you want? And what are your interests and your goals? And how do you grow? Like, what does your personal or spiritual development look like? And I don't know. I think it's an opportunity.
It's definitely an opportunity or an invitation for sure. Yeah. So it sounds like what I was hearing is it's a chance to get to know the person first before their body, let's say.
Yeah.
And it's a chance to practice vulnerability. It's a chance to practice speaking your boundaries in terms of what feels safe and what feels comfortable for you. And perhaps, I don't think it was stated, but a chance to go a little bit slower than you might otherwise have gone, right? You've got some time on your hands, so why not rush into something?
Yeah. And it's funny. I have a friend who she ended up marrying this guy, but this is like way before pandemic. Like this was, I don't know, 2008 or 9, or I don't even know. It was a long time ago, but she had like reconnected with this guy that she knew from childhood. And so they didn't see each other in like, I don't know, 20, 30 years or something. And they would, I guess back then everyone was Skyping. So they would Skype chat like every day for like a year. And I think, I don't know the exact timeline, but I mean, ultimately she moved over to Switzerland where he lived. But they had this beautiful online relationship for a year before, they were really in the same physical room. I'm not saying everyone has to like FaceTime with their Tinder match for a year, but I think what happens a lot, and I don't think this is unique to the pandemic, is a lot of times we focus on what we can't do. Like, oh, well, I can't date because of the pandemic. There's no parties, or I can't go to this, or I can't do that because of the pandemic. And it's like, yeah, like, look, my head's not sticking in the sand. Like, I know that there are things that aren't happening anymore. Life is not normal even now in June 2020 when we're recording this. But that doesn't mean there's not a lot of things that you can do. And I just think that's a really important mindset to have just in general. Like, yeah, there might be some limitations because, maybe you're a single parent, maybe, you live really far, you live in a rural place, or maybe just, there's all these other things, all these things that we tell ourselves, oh, I can't do this because I can't do this because of a pandemic. I can't do this because I'm fat. I can't do this because whatever. And it's like, well, what can you do? And I think that, and it doesn't have to be like 10 million things. It can just be like one or two things. Well, I can find someone online that is willing to do, some FaceTime chats before we actually see each other. And then I know the responses, at least I know what my audience would say, like, oh, well, no one wants the video chat. I'm like, great. That's a great weeding out tool then. Perfect. They're just, if someone's not willing to get on video with you, then like they are not interested in a long-term relationship. So the sooner you know that, the better. Anyways, I went on a few different tangents there, a few different thoughts, but
that's good. Veronica Grant, where can people find you on the internet?
So you can find me at my website, veronicagrant.com. And I have a free workshop called 5 Steps to Ending Overwhelm and Anxiety in Relationships. And that's really where I dive into the framework that I use around patterns and inner child work and how our families of origin impact the patterns and the people that we attract. So you can get that workshop at veronicagrant.com/workshop. Pretty easy. Cool. And then I'm on Instagram, and I'm Veronica E. Grant there.
Veronica E. Grant. I'll include links to all that in the show notes if you're listening as per usual. Thanks for the chat. It's fun to get to meet you. Me. I should have mentioned maybe 40 minutes ago to those listening, but if those noises you hear in the background are Veronica's 9-month-old child, there's not it was very, very mild. I could barely hear it, so I didn't want to interrupt, but it was fine. But for those that were curious, that's what was going on.
Yeah, I do usually mention that as a caveat when I'm recording my own show, but I totally forgot. I guess like the bad thing about having a good mic is that you have a good mic.
Right.
It picks up everything.
Yeah. I did a recording yesterday with my girlfriend as like a couples podcast, and I told her, just be very cautious of touching the table because it will sound in the microphone like a boom, boom, boom. She kind of looked at me funny, but I was like, no, this is a good microphone. Picks up stuff. Anyway, you're a gem. Thank you for spending some time chatting with me, and best of luck raising that tiny human of yours.
Thank you. I definitely will need it. And thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah. So that was Veronica Grant. As mentioned, I've included links in the show notes to her website. You can take that free quiz about anxiety. You can learn more about her, potentially sign up, work with her to build better relationships, get to know yourself better, and follow her on Instagram at Veronica E. Grant, I think it was. Anyway, you're the best. I appreciate you. I love your ears. How great are your ears right now that they can deliver my voice into your brain? How great's your brain? They could hear the things that your ears are providing and make sense of it. That I could sit in my bedroom right now and just communicate into this microphone with the gardeners outside making loud, obnoxious noises, and I can tell myself, you know what? Don't worry about it, man. It's going to get where it needs to go, however that needs to happen. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your day. Keep smiling, keep breathing, and I will talk to you soon.